So hello everyone.
Hello.
Hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
That's good. That's good. So welcome to today's lesson. Last week we introduced the concept of strategic human resource management, and myself, Chi, your tutor. Um, I teach human resource management and strategic management and organizational behavior, and I've worked as a management consultant and HRM consultant, mostly in the recent past in the UK. So today we'll be building on that. We'll be looking at the second learning outcome, which has to do with um, strategic HRM plans and workforce planning. Are there any questions so far from what we've done last week?
I've only begun from today.
Yeah, sorry, you wanted to do what?
I started these lectures from today. I
Oh,
was.
okay. So last week we introduced the unit and the learning outcomes. We talked about the one. Let me see what let's say again. These learning outcomes, 4 learning outcomes. So we'll have at least 4 lessons, and then we have an extra lesson around coursework support usually. That's what I prefer to do. So last week we introduced some basic models and what is strategic human resource management, what is human resource management, what are the external factors you need to look at in terms of that. And then this week we'll be looking at the second learning outcome, which has to do with how do you develop a strategic HRM plan. So hopefully you also have access to the recording from last week.
Okay.
So we will be looking at different models of strategic HRM also. Sorry, just 1 second. 1 second. Let's double check something. Yep. Right. Sorry, this is what we did last week. Someone has swapped it. 1 second. Someone has swapped the slide, so 1 second. I will just make sure I'm using the most up-to-date version.
There's a lot of noise.
Sorry, what did you say?
A lot of noise in the mic.
There's noise in the mic. Okay.
You know.
Yeah, this one. Let me see if there's anything comes about the noise.
It's like there's some breeze passing over it.
Okay. Let's see if there's anything that will reduce that. Okay. Yep. Okay, so let's start. Sorry, hopefully this is a bit better. So today we'll be talking about human resource planning. This involves looking at your current workforce, the number of your workforce, the skills they have, and then looking at your future demand, forecasting your future demand, and then seeing if there's a gap, and then making concrete plans to fill that gap. So there are some things we need to consider, both internal and external factors, in terms of developing your strategic HRM plan or your workforce plan. So this is a pictorial representation of the process. The obvious place we usually start with is the organization's strategic plan or the business plan. So whatever the organization has prioritized for the next 1 year or 3 years or 5 years as its key priorities and strategy forms the basis of our start point for HR planning. So, for instance, some organizations, they want to expand internationally. Others may want to create new products, product lines. Others may want to grow market share. Whatever their strategy is, that's our starting point. They will now say, what are the human resource requirements for that? So that's now our resourcing strategy, which means we now need to start looking at forecasting future demand for products and services, and therefore future demand for employees, hours employees will work, skills employees will need. We also do what's called scenario planning. So in scenario planning, we kind of have scenario A, scenario B, scenario C. So if there's an economic recession, what's our plan for that kind of situation? If there's a very buoyant and very positive economy, what's our plan for that scenario? If there is a major change, like in the UK now, we are considering a Brexit or a no Brexit situation, leaving the EU or not leaving the EU, nobody's sure which way to go. So you should have at least 2 or 3 scenarios for a no Brexit, a hard Brexit, or a soft Brexit. So that kind of thing. So we do scenario planning, and then we also need to do what we call turnover analysis. So turnover is the amount of employees who leave your organization, who resign from the organization in a year, right? That will be your annual turnover. So if, for instance, every year on average, you lose 40 employees resign on average, then you can estimate that next year, you're going to have 40 employees who are also going to resign, because that has been the trend, that has been the average. So we don't need to wait until these 40 people actually resign and then start struggling to recruit them. Because if we do, one, there may be a gap between when the person leaves and when the new recruit starts, and that gap will be a shortage that will affect your business. Secondly, the new people may not be well trained or may not have a smooth handover, right? So it's better to get them early on, let them get all the training, let them monitor, shadow people, and then if anybody resigns, they can use their notice period to have a smooth handover and a seamless transition, and you have people in place right from day one of the resignation to take over. So that's why you need to do your labor turnover analysis as part of your workforce plan. So all of this leads your scenario planning, your forecast of your demand and supply forecasting, and your turnover analysis, and your understanding of the business strategy. All of this leads to what we call the human resource plan or the workforce plan.
Okay.
That human resource plan will have sub-plans, or it will have some sections in it. One around recruitment and resourcing, another one around retention, another one around flexibility and redeployment of workers, work productivity and scheduling, things like that, right? And it may have some softer issues like planning to improve the work environment, the organizational culture and climate, employee attitudes and employee behavior, things like that, the softer aspects of planning, right? So that means you also need to do some work environment analysis to analyze the culture and climate of the organization and see, do you want to plan to change this or to strengthen this, to reinforce it, to make any interventions in it. And also your operational effectiveness analysis, how effective is your production process, your employee process, and so on, to see what needs to change. So these are the sub-components or sub-processes that go into workforce planning, strategic HRM planning, and these are the outcomes we expect from strategic HRM planning. So if you've got any questions, just feel free to stop me, ask me. But is this clear? Any questions so far?
It's clear.
All right, that's fine. So we look at both internal and external factors when we are planning, when we are doing HRM planning. So the internal factors are internal to the organization, while the external factors are the business environment it operates within. So within the internal organization, you look at some key issues that will dictate the nature of your workforce plan and planning process. So for instance, you look at your organizational culture, your capacity and staffing levels. Do you have enough staff? Your ability to implement this plan, your ability for your employees to change, to adapt, to be quickly able to adapt to new and changing circumstances. So you need to look at key internal factors like that. So you need to do some evaluation and assessment of technology, work processes, staffing levels, things like that. Then you need to look clearly at the organization's strategy and the organization's sustainability. What are the sustainability? Is the strategy and its current production process sustainable in the long term? And then we now look at the employee skills and competencies, right? So these are the key things we look at in terms of the internal factors. So we'll go through some of them very briefly in the next few slides before we look at the external ones. So your organizational needs in terms of your ability to adapt to changes, your skill competencies, ability to adapt to technological changes. You need new equipment. You need to train staff to use new equipment. Is consumer behavior changing to the point where you need to train employees for that kind of thing? So we'll look at the organizational needs. A lot of this will be obviously influenced by external factors also. So we'll look at those hand in hand. Some organizations will do this, which is at this stage they would start looking at the possibility of outsourcing and offshoring. So as part of your HR planning process, you may consider the option of outsourcing and offshoring. Do you think that you can get this produced by a workforce at a much cheaper rate in a different country? Or do you stick with your current country and workforce? So just as a quick thought, what do you think are the advantages or disadvantages of outsourcing your production? Anyone?
Sorry?
What do you think will be the advantages or disadvantages of outsourcing your production?
Advantage might lead you to have cost-effective solutions while you are getting your products manufactured outside or outside sources. But on the downside, I think if it's like you have less control over the final product or the outcome of the product. So it can be that it can be implied that the final outcome of the product might be not as per the quality standards as the requirement of an organization.
So this is very good. You have less control. That's one of the disadvantages, especially in terms of quality of the final product or service. Sometimes even it might start off being cheaper, but then the cost starts piling up, right? And you don't really have the skilled manpower in-house to bring it back all of a sudden, because sometimes after you outsource, you lose that skill base. So outsourcing has to be treated, very carefully, and it has to be a more long-term approach, more long-term strategy, not a knee-jerk reaction. But that's one of the things you obviously will consider in terms of workforce planning. So we also need to consider skill requirements. What are the current skills and competencies of your workforce? Then what skills and competencies you expect that they will require, say, in the next 3 years or in the next 5 years, depending on your time frame for planning. So if there's new technology coming in, then there may be new skills and requirements. If your competitors have started doing things differently or introducing new products and you need to compete and copy that kind of thing, or you need to innovate, then there may be new skills and competencies your workforce will require. So you need to have a reasonable estimate of your current skill profile and your future skill profile in the next 3 to 5 years or the next 1 year to develop that.
Okay.
Sorry, any questions?
It's okay.
All right, okay. So another thing you need to consider in your workforce planning is your workforce profiles. So some organizations, in fact, this goes back to the root of workforce planning. The old name, we used to call this manpower planning. For two reasons, we changed to workforce planning or HR planning. One is then most factories used to employ mostly men, right? While women stayed at home. But as society changed, attitudes changed, cultures changed, and you had more women coming to work, then you can no longer call it manpower planning. You have to call it workforce planning to be gender equal. And then also the other reason is manpower planning focus more on statistics and quantitative calculations, whereas workforce planning, the modern way we do it now, we combine both that quantitative and the qualitative, what we call the hard and the soft aspects of planning. So we start planning for more qualitative things like changing organizational culture, employee behavior, and things. So you need to look at your workforce profile and factor that if your current workforce is mostly male, mostly female, or not enough young people, and so on, or of one ethnicity or race, or so on and so forth. This may either raise issues in terms of your corporate social responsibility to the wider community and society. You may be looked at either as a racist or sexist organization, and that will affect your brand reputation. Also, you may lose out on the advantages of diversity. People from different backgrounds bringing different ideas and different ways of working to contribute and build that synergy. So you may plan to take deliberate actions to address your workforce profile, either targeting younger employees or older employees or female employees or employees from certain ethnic or racial backgrounds and so on in your recruitment. And also your promotion process. If you may have recruited them, but they are maybe at the bottom, and you don't see them at the top at the leadership position, so you now have to prepare some sort of leadership development pipeline that addresses that. So all of these are issues you need to take into consideration when you're doing your workforce planning. Sometimes legislation also requires you to look at these issues. And also you can also look at it as a business opportunity. So in Europe, we have what we call an aging workforce profile. A lot of people are living older, but very healthy, because the medicine and the hospital services have improved over the past decade. So we now have people living for longer and are still quite healthy and are ready to work, right? So we now have a situation where organizations are trying to retain people instead of losing people for that experience and skill set at maybe 60 years of age. For anyone who wants to continue, you can work up to 65 or even 70, right? If not, you will need a lot of skilled employees with a lot of experience just because they retire. But now we know that they can live longer and they can live healthy and they can work. Some people are even directly recruiting from this massively skilled and experienced segment of the workforce. So you see quite a lot of people even targeting older workers and saying, you know what, you can do partial retirement. If you retire from another company, you can come to work for us, bring all your skills and knowledge, but you don't have to work 5 days a week, you can work 2 days a week. and just allow us to tap into your knowledge and skills. So that is strategic workforce planning, looking at the strategic opportunity in your environment and your workforce profile, and trying to develop a plan to tap into that opportunity.
All right.
So move on now to external factors. So we looked at a few internal factors that you need to consider when you're doing workforce planning. You're looking at them a bit more in detail. We looked at the earlier slide that gave a diagram of all this. So we've looked at the more internal ones. So we're now looking at the more external ones. But it can all be related back to that diagram we looked at earlier. But like we said, the internal and the external go hand in hand. They don't really they relate to each other. So if there's an aging workforce outside, there might also be an aging workforce within your current employee profile. So external factors you need to look at are things that will affect your business from the external environment, operating environment, and are usually outside your direct control as an organization. They may be threats or they may be opportunities. So you can plan on that basis. So one thing to look at, obviously, is the supply of labor. So the labor market, you need to do a labor market analysis. Do you have a tight labor market, a loose labor market? Do you have enough employees looking for jobs, or do you have too many jobs looking for too few employees? Right? So very quickly, if you have a lot of jobs but very few employees willing to apply for those jobs, what do you think will happen to salary? What do you think organizations will do to the salary?
They will reduce it.
No. So this situation, you have jobs, but not enough people are applying. So let's say you have 10 jobs being advertised for a chartered accountant, but there are only 2 or 3 chartered accountants that are unemployed and looking for jobs. So they will choose between these 10. They are going to choose whichever company makes the most lucrative offer. So in that case, what do you think will happen to the advertised salary? So in that case, the salaries usually tend to go up. When you have too many jobs but not enough employees willing to apply for those jobs or take those jobs. When you have the opposite, very few jobs and you have 100 employees looking for them. So when you advertise a job and you get 2,000 people applying for that job, then you can either reduce the salaries or working conditions. It's a buyer's market at that point in time. You can basically do quite a lot to screen out people and to select whoever you think is the best. So you need to do your labor market analysis that will determine the salaries you're going to advertise jobs for that year. To also determine the number of employees, if you need numbers to do your work. Again, if it's a situation where you can't get the numbers, you may now need to think of outsourcing or offshoring. So there are some jobs where it's very difficult to get the numbers. Either jobs people don't like doing, like very rigorous, physically demanding jobs, things like that. Or it may be a question of there are people but not with the right skills. So if you think about highly qualified doctors and engineers, they are very difficult to come by. And then the problem now is a skill shortage in the labor market. So you need to look at your demand and supply. Also, immigration. The rules around immigration for each country affect it. So countries in Europe and America and Canada that change their immigration laws every few years. Sometimes they do that in response to the skill demand labor market. Where they think they need more high-skilled people, they open the immigration channels. Or where they think they've got enough, then they start tightening the immigration channels. And that will affect you as an organization trying to recruit. So you have to be very aware of what the labor market is at any point in time. We need to look at labor costs. We talked about that what's the going rate for jobs, and consider opportunities of outsourcing if it's cheaper, or it's also not going to affect your quality and other issues, ethical issues. So, for instance, what's the going national minimum rate, minimum wage rate, what's going salaries for each role and each job, and you look at the skills. So these are key things externally you need to look at in terms of your workforce plan. So when you actually write your plan, you can have sections, sub headings with very short write-up, which gives you a labor market analysis, with your labor cost analysis for some key roles, key jobs in the organization, and analysis of skill base of the workforce and availability in the labor market. You also need to consider if there's any education provider that is increasing or decreasing the flow of this skilled manpower. So if, for instance, new universities or training institutions are coming up in that country or in that area capable of producing people with this skill set, then that will affect the future supply of labor in the next 2 to 3 years as the first set of graduates or trainees qualify. But if some of those training institutions or universities are downscaling or closing down, then you can predict that in 2 or 3 years' time, when their last cohort graduates and they've scaled down or closed down, you have a shortage of labor. So you need to keep an eye on that. So key external factors you also need to consider: government policy, giving an example of immigration policy, education policy also, and so on, will affect your business, but also direct policies relevant to your organization. So for instance, if you are making a certain product and they put an export ban or import ban on that product, if some countries put an import ban or increase taxation or increase import duties or export duties or whatever, it's going to affect your cost of production or ability to produce or sell, which may mean you either have to pass on the increased cost to the final consumer, or if that the final consumer is not willing to pay the extra cost, then you may need to cut back production, which may mean you may need to cut back some of your workforce and leave some of them off. Right? You also need to look at your competition. So we call this your competitor analysis, labor market. Competitor analysis, labor market competition. So what are your close competitors doing? And are they stealing your workforce? Are they poaching your workers? Are they paying a higher rate so your workers are tending to resign from jobs working for you and going? So you see this, maybe Apple may be stealing IT software developers from Google, right? Then Google has to closely monitor what Apple is doing and how much they are paying if a lot of their people are leaving. So you get this information, for instance, from exit interviews. When an employee handing their notice to resign, do an exit interview, ask them why they're going, where they're going, how much are they going to be paid in a new job, right? And if they're willing to answer, that gives you an idea of what your competitors are doing. And you need to now plan to respond to that, either to match what they're doing or better it, or offer an alternative incentive that even though you can't pay what your competitor is paying, but you can maybe make your place more family friendly, or provide more training opportunities or more promotion opportunities that will make people stay. So you have some sort of retention plan at the basis of that. And then the changing nature of work. So as societies change, cultural attitudes change, economies change, you start seeing it affecting your organization. So for instance, older generations, I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of Generation X, Generation Y, baby boomers, millennials. Is anyone familiar with those kind of terms? So the younger workers, we usually born maybe after 1990 or 2000, the millennial generation, they tend to like to switch jobs quite often, right? Whereas the more old-fashioned or older workers tend to stay with one employer for the rest of their career, right? So that was the idea of the job for life. And as nature of jobs change and nature of society changes, then you may now expect to have a more mobile workforce, and you have to plan for that. That some of your workers that you're investing in training and so on you may lose. So how do you respond? What do you do? Do you try to put a retention plan in place, or do you do more training knowing that you're going to lose a lot of people, so you just have to keep training, or whatever option you do, that will be your plan. But you need to figure that out. So we've already mentioned the younger generation, millennial generation, and so on. Part of their changing social attitudes and expectations is not just that they would switch jobs several times during their career, work for different companies, but also the nature of the contract. We have a growing increase in people demanding part-time work, more flexible forms of working from home maybe 2 days a week, working online, and so on. Like in the past, you hardly get any lecturer teaching online. Now you have me teaching online, and I also teach face-to-face. So we have that growing trend of different employee expectations, which you now need to plan for as an organization. You cannot box everybody into a rigid full-time 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 employment model. You need to have more flexibility, and you need to plan for this. So another key issue is the impact of automation and technology, as people prefer to shop online, order goods and service online, and new technology comes in, new apps, social media, and so on. Customer behavior changes, employee behavior also changes, so you need to plan for this in terms of your workforce, and how to do that, either in terms of training and skills, either in terms of providing equipment for these employees, or the very nature of how you employ people. The demand for products or services is also changing in terms of your market, the market you sell to. So you're part of your external business environment you're looking at is your customer market. So I'll just take a drink of water here. So, so we see some markets changing. So, for instance, if you are in the tourism business or hotel or hospitality business, and there's been a terrorist attack in that region, or earthquake or natural disaster, you tend to lose customers, right? So there are different things that can affect your market. Sometimes it's just consumer taste that changes. Sometimes people just start looking on television or social media, and people are talking a lot about traveling to Malaysia. Malaysia is so beautiful, or Saudi Arabia, or Dubai, and then all of a sudden they're thinking, oh, that's where I want to go for my next holiday. So consumer taste changed, so your market has changed, and then you need to plan for that increase or decrease in supply and demand of your goods and services, which often means an increase or decrease in your staffing levels, your workforce numbers and skills.
Okay.
So any questions so far?
It's okay. It's clear so far.
All right, good. So we'll look at the 2.2, summarizing the stages involved in planning human resource requirements. So broadly, we look at the initial stage, the environmental scanning stage, the gap analysis, the fourth stage being identifying your specific knowledge skill requirements, and then the fifth stage being execution, and then finally evaluation and implementation. So let's take that one by one. So the first stage, the initial stage, is basically looking at your organization strategy, right? The first stage, or your initial stage of planning, well, the first thing you do is to go and get a solid understanding of your organization's strategy or organization's plan. So let's say you are doing a 3-year plan, which is quite common, or a 5-year plan, or even a 1-year plan. what's the organizational strategy or key priorities for the next 3 years. And then that now start informing what your workforce requirements. That's the first thing to do. The second stage we call environmental scanning. So this is where you consider these issues in the internal and external environment we've talked about. Which we go through these internal factors and external factors we've just spent the past 10-15 minutes talking about, and start seeing how this relates to your workforce. So this will now tell you, government regulation is changing, therefore I need more employees, or I need more skills, or I need to stop this, I need to start that, or I need to change my workforce profile, and so on. So initial stage is understanding the organization's strategy and key priorities. Second stage is environmental scanning, internal and external environmental scanning, which moves on to the third stage, which is your what we call the gap analysis. So here, what we are looking at is producing an estimate of the future demand in terms of numbers of employees and the skills of employees. And then looking at our current number of employees and skills of employees. And then if there's a gap, then now our plan is very clear how to address the gap. So the gap may be that in future you estimate you need 500 employees. Currently you have only 300 employees. Therefore the gap is you need to recruit 200 employees. It may well be that by the time you look at skills, out of the 200 employees, 50 of them need to be engineers, another 50 need to be accountants, and so on, with certain qualifications or certain skill sets. So that is your gap analysis. Now, most people who will teach you gap analysis will tell you that it's usually a shortage, right? You need 500 employees, currently you have 300. But sometimes the gap is a surplus, right? Especially if you are in an economic recession. Sometimes you have 300 employees and then you expect that next year your sales will be low, or you are moving to new products and services. You need to lay off people in this department or this branch or with this skill set because you've moved to new technology. In which case, out of your current 300 employees, you will need only 200, so you need to lay off 100, right? So sometimes your gap analysis may reveal a surplus, not always a shortage. So just bear that in mind. So the fourth step now is where we do the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So you can think of that as identifying needs. The key thing is being your skills and knowledge, skills, and attitudes for the job, right? So when you identify the gap or the surplus, you now need to also think about this in terms of not just skills and competencies, but also knowledge and qualifications, and also attitudes and behavior. So if your workforce, you currently have 100 workforce, but they don't have a good work ethic, they are not reliable, or they're not good team workers, or they don't have leadership qualities or abilities or so on, then you can identify this. And then either you need to recruit people with this, or you need to train your existing staff to develop those things. So and at this stage you now start looking at also mapping out reward packages. So what kind of max salaries are we going to pay for this kind of roles? What kind of training do we need to provide? So there will be sub plans over your overall workforce plan. We have sections or sub plans for reward, retention, training, recruitment. The fifth stage obviously is execution or implementation, as some people call it. You can have the most beautiful plan, it looks wonderful on paper, but you can't execute, you can't implement it, then it's useless. So you have to have the implementation skills, the project management skills, the leadership or managerial skills to implement. And then the fifth stage obviously is your evaluation, monitoring, and planning. So at the end of 1 year or 3 years or halfway, if you are doing a 3-year plan, you can have midpoint review. where you look at your planning process and see how effective are we in this planning process. What do we need to learn? So that next time you start the planning process afresh, you have lessons you can learn and improve. That's the process of planning, the key 6 stages of planning. So these are some of the sub steps. You can read them by yourself, but I've already talked about that. You need a section on recruitment and selection and training and so on. So let's look at 2.3, which is developing human resource plan for organization, sub-plans. So this gives a visual diagram of some of the key things you'll be saying. We say that we start with the company strategy, and that gives you an idea of your strategic HRM plan. Step 1, initial stage, is what's the company strategy and priorities for the next 5 years. Then you develop your HR strategy and HR plan from that, right? So the company strategy gives you your strategic HRM plan. You have to do the environmental analysis, internal analysis, external analysis, identifying your key priorities in terms of HR priorities also, and so on. And that's your HR plan. That will now lead into the sub-plans, which is now actioning this your strategy, this your HR strategy in terms of a plan and a budget, an implementation plan and budget, right? So that's where you start having subsections or sub-plans for recruitment, selection, training, compensation and reward, performance, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what the diagram is telling us there. So nothing really new here, just re-emphasizing the fact that you need to do a gap analysis for your HR, that's determining your human resource needs. You need to have a section for recruitment. What's your recruitment plan or sub-plan or section within your workforce plan? Selection, your training plan. So basically, you think of your workforce plan as having sub-plans or children, right? Or sections, and you need a section for what am I going to train for the next year? What are the things that, and how am I going to deliver the training for the next 1 year? What's my recruitment plan for the next year? How many people do I need to recruit? Which jobs, which roles? What's my compensation or reward plan? What am I going to pay these people for the next 1 year? And so on. How do I improve performance and better manage performance for the next 1 year? So these will be your elements of your plan. This is just a recap. I think we covered this in the last week, but this is a good recap for those of you who didn't attend. Just reminding you about the recruitment process. So when we keep using the word recruitment, remember that these are the key stages of recruitment. Analyze requirements. So how many people do I need? I need 10 people with XYZ qualifications or skills. Then you plan your recruitment program and which channels am I going to advertise and so on. How long will it last? Define your requirements, which often means producing your person specification and your job description and your recruitment advert. So the advert you advertise usually has a link to the job description that says these are the duties and responsibilities of this job, and the person specification, these are the qualifications and attributes of the person who we expect will do this job well. Then you actually go to the attraction or recruitment stage where you advertise using multiple channels, internet advert, website advert, advertising in magazines, newspapers, even on the buses, depending on the type of job. Place adverts on billboards, wherever. You can go to universities and so on to career fairs to advertise. And then selection is where you now screen candidates, filter them for the best candidates. You can use the common methods being interviews, CV screening, or application form screening, testing, or assessment centers. Assessment centers is where you combine more than one of these methods together. So you can do a psychometric test, an interview, and a team-based exercise as part of the assessment center, for instance.
Okay.
So the remaining slides give you a bit more insight into recruitment and selection. If you go online to big companies like Tesco, Barclays Bank, HSBC, Audi, BMW, Volkswagen, you will see on their website a career section where they will have job adverts going on, and for some of those job adverts, especially for the graduate students in particular, they will have an outline of the selection process, whether you have to attend an assessment center, what will be involved in the assessment center, whether there's a stage 1 interview, stage 2 interview, telephone interview, one main interview, and so on. So you can see examples of that on company websites. At Tesco, the process was to identify the job vacancy, get it approved by a senior manager, develop the job description, person specification, develop your recruitment plan and budget for the recruitment, because you may need to pay for advertising and recruitment agents and so on. Then you advertise the job. You have to select your media channels, appropriate media channels for the right job. So if you are recruiting a low-skilled worker, it doesn't make sense to advertise in the Economic Magazine or Financial Times. In contrast, if you are trying to recruit, that kind of knowledge worker, high-skilled worker, then it makes more sense to advertise in that kind of place, and it costs a bit more money to advertise there. And then your screening of your CVs, shortlisting of CVs or application forms will be the first stage of selection, filtering. Then we usually have 1 or 2 interviews. Sometimes a phone interview. If you pass that, then you call for a face-to-face interview. Sometimes 2 or 3 face-to-face interviews, second interview, and so on. Sometimes even an assessment center, depending on the role. So that gives you an idea of the recruitment and selection process in practice, so that you know what we mean when we keep using the word recruitment and selection. Obviously, you have some key references you can look at, and so we've looked at, in summary, focus on HR planning. This is a very good diagram that summarizes a lot of the things we've talked about, starting from your business strategy, doing your planning, turnover, the subsets of the HR plan, and so on. We looked at all of this in detail, and then we looked in particular at the recruitment process. So any questions?
Well, it's been very informative so far, very clear.
Okay. Thank you very much. So hopefully see you next week. Probably we'll move back to Sundays, which is our usual lecture day. And so my plan will be to finish the lecture and then do a special lecture to give you some coursework support to help you prepare for the coursework. So that is the plan. All right. So if there are no further questions, any further questions?
When can we start the assignments?
So you can start preparing them now. The only thing is, it's usually better to have an idea of all the lecture material first, because you are going to use everything in the lecture material to start looking at the assignments, and they will be uploaded to your Moodle. I'm hoping you have access to the Moodle. This is what the assignment will look like. It will be a case study by Easy Clean, and then you have your tasks, which you have to do to answer the question. But if you cover everything we've taught, so we tend to like to teach the module and all the units. But this assignment brief should either be on your Moodle. If it's not on Moodle, you can send an email to Rahman or anyone else at Versity asking for a copy of the assignment brief to be uploaded to Moodle.
All right, that means from the 4th week.
Sorry?
That means that the course for the assignment will start from the 4th week.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
From the 4th week. Because
yes. So after I teach all the 4 lessons, I think we'll probably have a 5th lesson where we'll focus specifically on helping you prepare for the assignment. That's usually my style. So I'll tell Rahman to fix it if it's not already booked in. That's what I tend to do. But if you want to have a look at it, it should already be on Moodle. If it's not on Moodle, then you can ask Rahman. We tend not to upload it too early on so it doesn't distract students. But as we've already gone, like already 2 lessons in, maybe it's about time you guys start doing questions so that you have an idea. Okay, but if you look at it, you'll see that it covers everything we're going to talk about.
Okay. And any steps to follow for the rest of the week before the next lecture?
Sorry?
Any steps that I should follow before the next lecture? Any work
Yes.
that I should do?
What we always advise is, because we don't read every sentence in the slides and we don't read every slide, we tend to just focus on the key priorities. If not, we'll be here for the whole day teaching this slide. It's good to go back and read through the slides. Now that you've got the concept from our discussion, you can now go back and actually read through every sentence on the slides, understand it, and then look at some of the material that we uploaded on Moodle for some further reading. So that's the best way to do it, is to now go back and reinforce this learning. So when it comes to doing your assignment, you've already done the reading, it's now just time to start writing. That will really help.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
All right. So hopefully see you next week, and take care of yourselves. Have a nice weekend.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a nice weekend. Take care.